Hello, you're listening to an excerpt from the Cynical Optimist podcast, which you can find on all your favourite podcasting apps. Make sure to also hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so you don't miss any of our videos. Enjoy this discussion.
So, the release that people thought would never be released, or at least I think at one point me and Nick thought it would never be released, was Zack Snyder's Justice League, or the Snyder Cut, as it's called. It was a result of a multi-year campaign by very committed fans, including billboards, and I believe even a plane flew over an event once with like a banner saying release the Snyder Cut.
Comic-Con.
Yeah, so now the film has been released. The 4 hours are available on HBO Max, or in the UK it's Now TV. And it's alright. Yeah, I thought it was better than the theatrical cut.
Up by miles.
And seemingly, with its release, brought that campaign to an end. Or so you thought. But considering the last 20 minutes of the Snyder Cut are sequel baits for sequels that currently are not in existence, it's no surprise that, given the success of the first campaign, the fans are ready to go again with hashtag Restore the Snyderverse, the push to bring back Zack Snyder for more films. So supposedly this is very focused on a handful of things. James, you can correct me if there's anything I'm missing, but according to the Radio Times, because I wanted to go somewhere where I wanted to see what mass reporting was saying were, God, it sounds like terrorists, the demands of the fans. But it seems to be based around a Man of Steel 2, a solo Ben Affleck Batman film, the Ayer cut of the original Suicide Squad, and a sequel to the original Justice League, which can explore the anti-life equation and the other things that were not fully elaborated on in that movie. So it's an interesting one because obviously the Snyderverse DC kind of were going for the same thing as Marvel when we first started off, back in the golden years of 2016, when everything seemed so much more simple, even though there was a lot of political turmoil in both the UK and the US. It wasn't quite 2020, so it was fine. And that's when Batman v Superman came out, and obviously the plan at the time was that this was building to one shared universe, DCEU. But then when that wasn't successful, we've ended up with this entire split of films. Arguably, this is what gave us such great films as the Oscar-winning Joker. And we had Birds of Prey. And, the continuity is now a little less set. And actually, when I was looking up, there are apparently, at various stages of production, still 18 DC movies. So my question is, maybe to James, given all that, do you still, do you want more Snyder?
Would I want more Snyder? In some ways, yes. I think, I mean, when you said Batman, the Batman solo film, honestly, my heart jumps. Ben Affleck is so great as Batman, but not just as Batman, as Bruce Wayne. And when in 2017, I believe, when we were announced that it was going to get a solo Batman film with Ben Affleck versus Jason Manganiello, Deathstroke, and it's going to be like a raid type Arkham Asylum type of film. It's going to be set in Arkham Asylum, and it's going to be a raid type film. I love the raid. It's a fantastic film. I was so hyped, especially with Ben Affleck writing and directing it. And obviously that's fallen through, so I would love to see that film anyway. The Snyderverse, I think it does lots of things well with the dark and grittiness. I know some people don't like the dark and gritty, but realistically, you can't always have happiness, and I liked the down-to-earth more tone of the, even though there's Superman in it, of the Snyderverse.
I think Justice League. I think the Snyder Cut of Justice League I think actually found a good balance for it.
Yeah.
Because I think the problem wasn't like the more down to earthness, and it wasn't even really the dark colour palettes. It was just the idea that the films just had to be like miserable the entire way through. And if you don't have any difference to that, it means that there's no real difference.
I think very little of my problems was down to in Batman v Superman, for instance. My problem was not the visual identity of the film in terms of being dark and gritty. It was the script, I think.
The script.
And I thought the script in the new Justice League, Chris Terrio and Zack Snyder's Justice League, I thought was a good balance, as Phill said. And I think Ezra Miller's Flash came across as a lot funnier. In being less outright funny, he was a funnier character overall, I thought. And I thought the script was way less lofty than if you go back and watch Batman v Superman, where it's all just like, if gods came down to the sky, and it's all just like that for 2.5 hours.
Jesse Eisenberg. Well, the writers, there are so many writers for Batman v Superman, and I agree, Batman v Superman definitely fall flat because of the writing, and even Wonder Woman, the recent one, 1984, that writing was a bit iffy. I think if we got people who Zack Snyder still is like the Joss Whedon person behind it all, and like directs a few of them, I think we could get some excellent shows. The Suicide Squad, the James Gunn one that's coming out in August, I've seen a few trailers for that, and it can't be as worse as the previous one, so that's always a plus. But also, it looks fun. It's got a really all-star cast. It looks like they're actually going to run with the theme of it's going to be a Suicide Squad, and these people aren't nice people. These people are mentally deranged people. And for looking at the slate as well, like they were going to make a Green Lantern film, which I'm more than happy for, and a Man of Steel too. I enjoyed Man of Steel. I think it was a good film. I don't think it was the best film, but I think when people remark on Superman's meant to be hopeful, it's like, well, this is his first outing. You kind of, if you start him off as hopeful, where's he gonna grow to? I feel like you start him off a bit grumpy because he's literally the last of his kind, XYZ. He's got lots of baggage, and over the films you get him to be that hopeful symbol that we know and love him to be. I think DC itself has so many great comics. I read a lot of the comics with the New 52 and Rebirth and what they're doing now with their continuity, and I think they have such a plethora of ideas and a pool of like genuinely fantastic characters. Like Ryan Cho who was in the Snyder Cut of Justice League. Zack Snyder wanted to do an Atom film with him, and I would love to see that. I think we can get an Ant-Man-esque film, but done in slightly different ways. I think the Snyderverse, I don't think it will be produced, by the way. I have no doubt in my mind that I'd be very surprised if this ever gets kicked off, because I think Warner Bros. Are done with it.
Well, I think it's interesting because I'm looking at the Change.com petition at the moment, 62,000 people at the time of recording. I'm a little sometimes confused because technically the Jason Momoa Aquaman films are still continuing, and the Wonder Woman films are still continuing, and a lot of the stuff that was laid down by Zack Snyder is still kind of continuing.
Yeah, and I think that is kind of the crux of what I think as well. And I guess my question for you then, James, is would you be fine if they announced Man of Steel 2, but Zack Snyder was not directing it?
In this scenario, would Zack Snyder have any dealings with it? Because I still think it's his character. Like, it is his verse, and taking him out of it would be...
I imagine he'd be exec producing.
Then, if the director was a good director and who has either got a passion for comic books and I think one of the things that Marvel does well is they get people to direct and write the films who are comic book fans. These people who actually have read comics and who have read a lot of the character and know the character very well, so they can write and direct for that character. Whereas some of the stuff that, not just Batman v Superman, but a few other films they just get a good director in, and a good director isn't necessarily going to deliver the character that is comic book accurate. Well, not just comic book accurate, but comic book faithful. So if it was a Man of Steel 2 with Henry Cavill, with Zack Snyder producing, and a writer who actually knows the character, I'd be more than happy with that.
So this isn't necessarily restore Zack Snyder to directing duties.
continue with the continuity and the tone that he started the universe off with.
But then there's nothing to suggest that Aquaman 2 or Wonder Woman 3, which supposedly is also going to happen, would be diverging too much from that anyway. So that's why I end up thinking this campaign won't go as far, is because I'm not... It's a bit more fluffy as to what their ask is. Like with hashtag release the Snyder Cut, it's a very defined goal. It's release a cut of Justice League by Zack Snyder. Restore the Snyderverse when you've already got some films in that continuity they're not going anywhere, they're still getting made.
Yeah.
It then becomes down to the nitty gritty of, well, what does that actually mean?
Well,
like, in reality, does it just mean another Justice League film? But surely that will be more dependent on how Aquaman 2, Wonder Woman 3 perform, potentially, than it is anything else. Because it will be showing how Gal Gadot and Jason Momoa can still draw people to see these characters. But I don't know.
I was going to say there are 5 films that are currently in development, and that is Suicide Squad, which is coming out this year, Black Adam film with Dwayne Johnson as which I'm hyped for, because Dwayne Johnson looks like he says, he's talked about the comics a lot. He's very passionate about this character, which I think is again what you need. You need a lead who is passionate about those characters. The Flash in 2022, Aquaman, and then Shazam: Fear of the Gods.
On that note, Dwayne Johnson has apparently been massively pushing for a restore of the Snyderverse, and he's apparently a little bit at odds with Warner Brothers at the moment to try and restore it, which I thought was interesting.
Considering how Shazam is
was a departure.
Well, it was a departure, but obviously it still has. Obviously, it's not Henry Cavill because it cuts off here at the neck. But it still has a scene at the end, doesn't it, with Superman in it? So it still implies it takes place in a world with Superman.
Yeah.
Obviously, they could pull something out and be like, oh, it's not the same one, but...
And it is the same suit.
Yeah, it is the same suit, exactly. It is the same... Visually, it looks like it's Henry Cavill, which is the whole point.
And I was quite excited after Shazam, because I thought the two... I'm somewhat on board with Restore the Snyderverse in its kind of slightly ambiguous kind of thing, because I think they could have still had, because I think Shazam should be that film what it ended up as. It shouldn't have been dark and gritty. It's about a kid, and I think that ended up correct. But equally, why not have different sort of tones and different kind of directors and stuff, and then I have no problem with Zack Snyder bringing all the fun characters into the sort for the Justice League standalone movies, and integrating all those different characters, even if it's a bit of a tonal shift. I think I'd be absolutely fine with that. I think the problem now is they don't really know what they're doing as producers, and there's going to be a Batman trilogy which is in a different continuity. Joker was in its own bubble of continuity, and I think it might get a bit confusing if now, because I love the look of the Matt Reeves Batman movie. I think that looks fantastic, and I want that trilogy to go ahead, but it might be a little bit confusing if then the Ben Affleck Batman is kind of restored and you start getting two different standalone Batman films coming out at the same time.
And the same thing goes for obviously the David Ayer cut of Suicide Squad.
Yeah.
Like, it is definitely possible that I definitely believe that he was screwed over by executives making that movie, and they released a crap cut. But now the Suicide Squad is coming out in August. They aren't gonna risk James Gunn's version over, re-releasing the 2016 one. I just don't see them doing it. The problem is that throughout all this, the executives at the highest up point have been blowing with the wind. Like, the thing that really needed, and the key difference, I guess you could say, between how people view the DC EU and the MCU, is the MCU is headed up by a producer, and the DC EU is seen to be headed up by a director.
Yeah.
So there is no Kevin Feige-esque person on the DC side. Because I imagine people got nervous over at Marvel when Thor 2 was, bad.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
and, Age of Ultron was just average. That Phase 2, actually, when you look back at it, was kind of up and down.
Definitely. But they persevered.
They trusted in that. They had that producer, that kind of person who was probably in a lot of meetings, reassuring a lot of people. And I'm not convinced the equivalent exists on the DC side.
And when something does go wrong, they kind of owned it as well. Like they're now, like, we got a lot of sort of carryover from Thor 2 in Endgame, and we got carryover from Age of Ultron in WandaVision. They're owning their sort of their flops. Whereas DC is just it's like a fly in a room, isn't it? It's kind of bouncing around between things and can't quite settle.
Also, Marvel are giving you reasons not to skip the bad movies in your rewatches.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of that. But yeah, it's unfortunately WB seems to be... And honestly, I'm surprised we haven't seen it more in some of the other franchises, like...
I think we have seen... Like, Fantastic Beasts is a mess.
Oh,
yeah,
gosh,
but they're still convinced there's going to be 5 films of that, aren't they?
Well, yeah.
But I also think Fantastic Beasts suffer from what Aquaman will be suffering from, is the whole outside, the actors and stuff as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
people were... Because with Grindelwald... Let's not be around the bush. Johnny Depp and Amanda Heard thing.
Yeah.
Like, I think...
Yeah.
I mean, I personally, I really enjoyed Aquaman 1. I don't know if I'll go see Aquaman 2, because it's still got Amanda Heard in it. And vice versa. There are a lot of people who did the same with Grindelwald, and now they're going to be changing... Johnny Depp's fine, isn't he?
Yeah.
So I think those two franchises have also suffered because of actors backing out, like Ben Affleck backing out of the Batman. Henry Cavill's got The Witcher. I don't know if he's going to want to return for Man of Steel.
It's interesting, isn't it? They seem to have, and again, I think one thing we've all, regardless of our opinions on Restore the Siniverse, I think we all agree there is a problem with producing behind the scenes at Warner Brothers, because they have had so many issues that just don't really, like, the biggest thing with the sort of the Disney empire was the Gina Carano thing, which was silently pushed aside, and then they had the James Gunn thing, which was they made a U-turn on because it was barely a story at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Whereas Warner Brothers seem to have just landed in. They've got J.K. Rowling being a nightmare. They had footage of Ezra Miller pushing over a fan. They've got stuff of Johnny Depp, Amber Heard. They've just been like shit after shit. Ray Fisher on the set of Justice League. There was some really bad stuff going on with Joss Whedon and what's his face, the guy that sort of does.
Lots of stuff are coming out against Joss Whedon now. And I don't know how to feel about it.
Yeah, it's just a sort of nightmare. And I guess, I don't know, it's kind of weird because you either want them to go one way or the other. Either just hit the full refresh button and start anew with a new continuity, but they seem to just really not know what they're doing.
They're just non-committal. They seem to be waiting for some, I don't know, sign from a greater being.
Yeah.
So as a result, you're ending up with all these different continuities. Some of these films are in the main one, some of these films aren't. They can't commit to anything because...
Yeah.
Flippy floppy. I think the Snyderverse was going to come back. They would have to just get someone to produce, like maybe it's Zack Snyder, who doesn't really direct any more films in his own verse, but he is the producer and he is managing all the different shows. I think that could work, but I think again Warner Brothers, I don't know if they'd commit because they just seem very, what's the word?
Erratic.
Erratic. Yeah, they're fan reactive. To be fair, fan reaction has gotten to Snyder Cut to be released, so in some ways it does do good, but you're always going to find people who hate, and I think Warner Brothers are a bit too scared, whereas Disney, I think, are very firm in their beliefs of people who throw shade at certain films. Like, there are people who don't like Endgame, but they don't really listen to that, they listen to the positives.
Yeah.
And they kind of just run with that. Like,
yeah.
If Thor 2 was a bad film, and Suicide Squad was also a bad film, and look at the executive reactions from that. Like you said, Disney turned Thor 2 they kind of ignored it, and now they've brought it back to be a bit more, hey, look, this bad film, we recognise it was bad, but we're going to try and still pay homage to it.
Yeah.
Whereas Suicide Squad, they literally made a second one and just called it The Suicide Squad instead.
Yeah. And even when that first one was sort of on its way to release, it bounced back and forth between, people reacted well to this particular trailer. Let's re-edit the film to match this particular trailer. It's just an absolute mess, isn't it?
There's not someone who's just behind it going, no, we're going to keep it this way. Yeah.
And
instead of that.
And going back to what you were saying about having a Kevin Feige for the DCEU, I remember very early days on the podcast we were talking about, they already had this backlog of The Flash and Arrow and stuff on TV, and that was running consecutively while they were making Man of Steel and Batman v Superman, and there was still this potential of like, why not just kind of use what you've already got, so you've got a strong start, and you might hit the ground running if you've already got these characters established. You can just go straight in and use it and have one continuity. Because Phil, you and I were unhappy at the time because like when they did announce that Ezra Miller was cast as the Flash, we were like, so they're running two continuities at the same time. That's a bit annoying and a bit confusing. And now it's about 5 at the same time.
5. Oh, yeah, I agree. I think they could have. I think if Warner Bros had been smart, they would have just like you said, used Arrow, used Flash, and gotten films of like other superheroes and used the TV. Basically, what Disney are doing now, but what they should have done with Daredevil and Jessica Jones and stuff like that is like they should have just integrated that into the films and just made it one universe. Whereas,
but even where they have been smart is even with stuff like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Daredevil, and Jessica Jones. Even that stuff that's kind of not in the core continuity, it doesn't necessarily contradict the main continuity. It could still be in that same universe.
I mean, Daredevil does mention Captain America.
Yeah, exactly. They have action figures, and you see the Battle of New York in newspapers and stuff. I think DC just even the stuff in the same continuity, like Wonder Woman 84, I watched, and she's sort of become this kind of pacifist character. And then Justice League, in Zack Snyder's Justice League, she's just splatting people against the wall, left, right, and centre. And it's that like, I personally, I think where we do differ slightly, I agree in that the production is like totally off the ball at the moment. But I don't think Zack Snyder's the person to be sort of to take a step back and be kind of logical in the direction of a universe, because I noticed with Batman v Superman, I think he wanted to do the Dark Knight Returns, and he wanted to do the Death of Superman, and he wanted to do that, and I think it's a little bit. I think he's a great visionary director, and that really works. But I think you need someone to sort of be a bit patient, and even though Kevin Feige's a massive fan of the work he's doing, I think he's just very good at that plan, like a TV head writer. He's just very good at kind of like pacing out the action.
Kevin Feige's playing the long game. Just Zack Snyder feels like he just wants to get to. He wants Death of Superman. He wants this. He wants this.
Yeah.
He wants it all now. And it's like you've got to build up to it. Endgame is so fantastic because it's 10 years in the making.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think you could find a producer that kind of complements Zack Snyder, and they could kind of work together. You need one of them for the vision, and the other one just to slap Zack's hands away from the controls every now and again. Just be like, back. We'll do that in the next one.
Like we always said with Russell T Davies and Stephen Moffat. Stephen Moffat was a fantastic writer under the slapped hand of Russell T Davies. Whereas you let him off on his own, and it's all over the place.
No, we can't have 3 Green Lanterns. Only one. One.
And I think the only thing, obviously, if you tie in the TV continuity, although I agree, it would have been. I think the best choice would have been just to get Grant Gustin and Stephen Amell into the films. They both wanted to do it as well. There's interviews of them wanting to do it.
Yeah.
I agree.
And I feel bad. Melissa Benoist.
Yeah. I think the only thing they just have to be careful how they work it in. The one thing I'll note about where I think things are going with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and you could almost argue a little bit of WandaVision, although obviously the final episode had a lot of stuff to take on board, is that I think you'll be able to watch the next movie without having watched any of the TV shows, and it still would have made sense. Because obviously where Endgame leads off with the handing of the shield, if the next film, he has the shield. There's technically no continuity missed. This is a side story of him, erring and ahhing about it. Whereas I think you have to be a bit careful that you don't start creating, like, this massive requirement. Well, MCU, it's a bit late to not create a massive requirement. But I suppose they still, at this early stage of Disney Plus, don't probably want to make it so you have to... It may do them short-term harm if they have the required reading be Disney Plus exclusives for some of the movies.
Yeah, and I think, you're right, and you can pretty much jump on board without having the sort of background reading and stuff. When I watched the Snyder Cut, the sort of end, the epilogue came on, and my partner looked at me as if to say, just like, the fuck is going on here? And I said, like, oh, well, if you watch the Batman v Superman Ultimate Edition, there's this scene where the Flash travels back, but it's actually a different version of the future. And if you've read the comics, then that future is a reference to the fact that... and it's just like, what the hell? Like, the background reading you have to do is just...
I think the nightmare scene would probably be... Again, it's just too much too soon, but also I think it's in the Snyder Cut because I think Snyder knows... Zack knows that he's probably not going to get this, and he just wanted to go, hey, this was something maybe for a future film.
Then again, because they're just bouncing off in so many directions, like Joker, Batman, new series, this, that, and the other, I don't see the harm in giving him $100 million to make a barren desert film, and just like, why not? His films like objectively didn't make a lot of money. Like a film like Batman v Superman should have made more than it did, but then you just scale the budget down. If it's not making the money that you want, you like, they need to just say, okay, Zach, make your desert film in the future kind of thing, but we're only going to give you 150 million or whatever. Like
how scaled down budget? It's like, okay, the Flash, we don't have the money for the special effects anymore. You're going to be running on the spot of these two lit sparklers against this green screen.
Do you know how easy it is to do slow motion practically, like without any budget? It's
I mean, Zack Snyder knows. He throws in too much.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He throws in too much money. Yeah, like you can do literally, it's as simple as get everyone to stand still and then make him run round them, and then you speed it up. It's really simple.
You don't need all like the lightning coming off him in all the different directions.
Yeah,
also, that doesn't even happen in the comics. Like, there's too much lightning. That's killing people.
Yeah.
Also, him running like this.
Oh yeah, his weird. Oh, we can't see this because we're doing this audio, but yeah, the flailing arms.
Yeah. Well, I'm guessing that's just because they want to try and make it different to how they do it in the Flash TV show.
But why? They do it perfectly.
I mean, the way they need to have him do it is they need to have him Naruto run.
Oh my!
Move his arms out.
100% would watch that.
All right, is that going to do us?
Yeah, I think that's the discussion, isn't it? What do you think?
I think we're all broadly on the same page. I think with this, in that the producers are just, what the hell are they doing?
Yeah, I'm all for the Sonyverse. It just needs someone like Kevin Feige behind it all to A, slap Zack, and B, just to have like a cohesive story, but a slow, steady burn, not a jet burn.
#slapzack.